One question,
Right.
and it'll be quick, but Carly, you can probably, y'all can help me with this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, when we're talking about an RSA conversion and we're talking about what we would or wouldn't have to pay, I know we don't know that, but we're estimating that based on our conversation we've had for months. If RSA's, contract roughly, tier 2 or 1, whatever we would be doing, is 7% that the employee and 7% that we have to basically put up. I think we have to match whatever that number is, correct?
Our rate changes every year.
Okay, but I'm basing that, but can we assume it's close to that number though? We have to put up,
We're at like at 8 something, I think, this year.
okay,
Yeah.
so, all right, let's just say 8 something. And right now in the fire and policeman's pension, if I remember this correct, aren't we putting like 16% in? Or something,
We are.
really high number?
We're putting in 14% now.
Okay,
14.5%.
And the employees are putting in.
So just 1 point down from that. So we put in 14, they put in 13.
So if you transition to RSA and those percentages stayed the same for a period of time and maybe you move them down over time, you mentioned that, I think that's a great idea. Does that difference between what is required and does that count to that pool? And can you negotiate, I guess I'm thinking, sorry, it's great outside, by the way, the weather's awesome outside, anyway.
You got a little fresh
Yeah,
air.
exactly,
in your-
fresh air in my brain, I'm waking up, but can you negotiate potentially with them to say, okay, this is the rule of 7 and 8.5, whatever that is. Well, can you negotiate and say, well, the employees are gonna put in 13, and we're gonna put in blank?
So,
And in lieu of some of this stuff we're talking about, because that's a lot of money.
so RSA
Right.
does not require, RSA requires the percentage pay in, but that is based off of their underlying data. They don't necessarily require a percentage, they require that that their assumed rate of return and their amortization period is set at a certain level. With all of those calculations that flow in based off of your salary projection, then you are set a percentage. So that percentage changes year to year depending
On what everybody's making and how long we're living and
Right.
all those other things.
Right.
But anything that we pay above that stated rate that they look at, that can count toward that liability, I'm assuming, or they will work
Sure.
with us to.
They'll take any money that you want to throw at them.
Absolutely. Well, I just kind of wondered, could they calculate that liability and say, well, instead of paying this, y'all pay 12%? I'm just throwing, I don't know. I'm just asking.
So I
Could
think,
that happen?
and I'd like to ask the mayor probably to step in too. We've had conversations with RSA possibly about negotiating some of their underlying assumption data and how it flows into their calculation. From the conversations that I have been in, I have not felt that was a strong road to go down. I don't think that it's cut off specifically, but I wouldn't say that they are overly trying to work with us to get it to a manageable level for us.
No, and the discussions we've had with Mr. Kelly has been basically on what they see as their protocols and practices to do this. We do know that they have negotiated with other entities, and I do think once you make a more formal step, then that negotiation can take on more of a, certainty. I think right now what they're going to say is 20-year amortization schedule based off the rates that we know today and the, all those other factors that are baked in, and that's what we're going with.
We're going to give you an indicative, this is what we think, but the deep dive really hadn't happened.
No,
Until
sir.
you go through this. They can base it on what they've done historically or whatever, but that doesn't mean they would do that for us. I get that.
Well, and
But I'm just trying to think, it sounds to me like though there's gotta be a lot of, that sounds like that would be a significant amount of money though that could go toward this. Are we calculating that potentially somewhere as an
yes.
offset or something? I'm assuming
No, I
we
wouldn't say,
are.
we haven't been calculating it as an offset. What I think that my general outlook has been was that if we are, let's say that, we do some, revenue generating activities that kind of let's say that it is $8 million that we need of increased cost to go to RSA. By the way, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that the RSA conversion calculation was that it would cost us $12 million a year to convert over. We currently already pay $4 million into our police and fire pension, so therefore the increased cost
It's
to
just the
convert is the
difference.
$8 million.
'Cause
Right.
you already have an established amount you're putting in anyway.
We already have our budgeted amount anyway that we're already taking into consideration. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that calculation first.
That's just not 1 year.
Oh, that's every year. Every year, yes, sir. And so what I will tell you that my calculus has been as far as how do we make up that 8 million every year? How do we budget for that 8 million? Is that part of making up that 8 million would be, can we make an agreement with the police officers and the firefighters to continue to withhold extra percentages to go towards that 8 million? Not that it's over and above the 8 million. If we can get to 8 million of revenue generation and they want to agree to put in more to try to get that amount down, I mean, that would be gravy. But that hasn't been what I guess my calculation has been.
Well, and I didn't mean to go down that rabbit trail, it's just, I thought that'd be a perfect discussion for the timing we're gonna talk about this. I mean, you know, as we kind of banter around ideas, Mr. Chairman, sorry
No, we.
for that,
I mean,
because
we've-
that
we've
came from a
got
conversation with
agencies
Chief
on
Smith.
schedule,
Just then,
but
and those
no
guys, we were just
structured-
talking about stuff.
No structured presentation, it's just a
Yeah.
time we can discuss it.
And I think we need to put all ideas on the table.
Yeah, I agree.
I would like to follow your idea a little bit further, so I like that idea, if that could work. But do the police officers or the police department have any concerns about something going black if we could take a little bit from their existing budget to put into the RSA?
I think the mayor's made that very clear with them also, is that if we can't have our cake and eat it too. That if we do this increase, this heavily increased cost, there's gonna have to be some give on some other side somewhere. You know, whether or not that is the equipment area or, you know, any other like belt tightening on other items.
We said that again yesterday at the police and fire pension fund meeting.
But I,
Harley, to Councilwoman Ravenhauer's point, Councilwoman Howard's point, it's a very good point. I think the way we do our budgets for police and fire may have to change. Because again, it's not that people are trying to cut positions, or we're not trying to do any of that stuff, but the way you actually conceptually look at that 40% of the budget, I think will have to change. And I think there is money in there that would not go in the surplus potentially, but I think you could still robustly fund this and still have some money.
But you, okay.
Correct, that's right.
I guess that was, and that was
I
kind
think
of
that's
my
a good point.
point. That was my point when I kind of stood up and said that the salary savings within PD, there's really no salary savings within fire, but the salary savings within PD rolls into surplus that we can then say is continuously set aside and goes into it the following year. That, I was trying to, I guess, like,
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I was trying to split the baby between the idea of
That's right.
defunding positions, but still having that money go into.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I think it's all the way you look at it. I would argue that, I mean, you're not defunding a position. I don't view it that way. I view,
You're not paying for
you're putting
unfilled
you're putting a realistic budget of what you think you can hire and what you need to run the department. I think you're gonna have to change the mentality on part of that. That's just, and you may have to, in the initial budget, not just wait for the surplus, Carly. I don't know. And I'm as big a supporter of police and fire as anybody at this table. But I think there's gonna have to be, you're gonna have to look under every stone.
Okay, well, Mr. Field, maybe you can help me understand this. If, you know, it seems like we have a problem with our police department and us being fully staffed and funded. So if we did find a way to fund this 8 million, we would try to get the whole 8 million from the police budget?
Oh, no,
No.
no, 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 no. It's not
It's not
possible.
possible.
It's
We
not
already
possible.
we got elevate money too, we're right. There's public safety fund, there's all kinds of stuff there.
Okay, so if we did that, this is what the police department and the officers are saying that would help boost morale and would help us get to where, you know, we're almost fully staffed. So do we wanna take those unfunded positions and the salary from that? Do we wanna take any funding from that and then fix the RSA, but then, like, will we still have the money to fund these positions to the fullest extreme like we need to?
Well, and so that, I guess
That's my concern.
and that's kind of where I think,
That's-
you know,
I think
that
that's
Chief
the
Rice
problem.
was going to, is that the idea, I hate to say it, but if you fund if you said that I'm creating a salary line item within TPD that is $30 million, but that if they were to be fully staffed, it would be 32 million, those positions will in effect have to go away. Whether or not that position control item comes away from the 289 sworn officers, whatever that $2 million delta is that takes up, and the amount of positions that it takes up to get there, they're not gonna be able to recruit, they cannot hire for those, for that fiscal year, period.
Yeah, they can.
No, they cannot because they're not funded for
All
them.
they gotta do is walk in here and say, city council, we need some more
To
money to
come,
hire these
but to
people."
come from where then?
Huh?
But to come from where then?
Well, where's it coming
Yeah.
from now?
It
It's
comes-
gonna come from
That's
unfunded
revenue.
positions.
Yeah, but I bet if we sharpen our pencil, there's a lot
No,
of
they're
departments we
talking
can
about
cut
taking the
personnel
salary,
budgets in.
salary savings
That's
off of them.
because,
No,
again,
the question was, where does
they're-
it come from now? And we have the available FTEs. I think the concern would be, here would be my concern. If we start budgeting based off anticipated vacancies, this group may be fine with that and can have that understanding that if we, do reach a certain percent, or we reach a certain point that we've got to hire, we're gonna do it. But again, as I look around this table, I don't know how many of us will be serving, whether 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. If we set that precedent, I do worry that going forward, it may actually be a long-term detriment to both police and fire. That, you would almost be asking them to start all over with new positions, and you know how difficult it is to get new positions on.
all I'm doing is I'm throwing out ideas.
No, I think it's a
But,
good
but
idea.
I think it's,
But I think it's-
you don't wanna do anything to cause them to do their job any harder, Walt, because they have a hard, ridiculous job, and I think you're gonna have to go to different recruiting models with
I agree.
sign-on bonuses. I think you're gonna have to totally change how you do that in the next 10 years.
I think it's,
But-
yes, I agree.
But I think, I'm asking, I don't think we've had a deep enough dive yet on this, on what that actual number is, if these contributions stay the same and do this. I know y'all are working on that, Carly, but I think, I'm just throwing out an idea after I talk to them about what actually is going into that pot. What is, and what that number is, we don't know that yet.
But that's
know?
gonna be part of what we wanna do in October,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
begin that discussion. I do think that if it was just the 6 of us, or 8 of us for the next 4 to 6 years, then, I know that we wouldn't have an issue with that. But I do worry that if, let's say you move them, and I'm being arbitrary here, let's say you move them down from 297 to 270, and you eliminate 27 positions within TPD, and it generated $3 million a year. If you start getting used to that money, and then all of a sudden we start hiring again, and there's new faces around this table, how hard is it?
Maybe they don't like the police.
That would be my concern, but
I
again, I
agree.
think it's an idea, I think we have to put a lot of ideas on the table,
Yeah.
and whether they're good, they're bad, whether they need exploring, I think that's part of this process we need to
Well, and
engage.
to Carly's point, though, there may be a way that you look at that number at the end of what it is, and then that money automatically goes somewhere. I'm just saying, we could change our budgeting way of how we look. We're gonna have to with those two departments.
And that's been a conversation that's been on the table, is do we take purely 100%, we know that salary savings from TPD automatically go into this roll for, now,
You could codify that.
Now,
Another
that's
council can change that,
something-
Walt, right? But we
Now-
could codify that.
now again, though, that's not a dollar amount you can count on. So I think when you're required to pay in $8 million more dollars a year, but yet you can't count on the revenue base that is going to be coming in to be able to pay for that, that's a very squirrely area to get into.
Agree.
Now, to be able to do our I'm sorry, Mr. Bell, to be able to do your save up.
No,
yes.
I'm with you. It's just that I don't know when, if in the last 25 years, we've been had full employment at the police department. I don't know if that's
Well,
happened.
in the
Or
3 or
most
4 years
departments.
that I've been on the council,
Mhm.
we have been structurally unable to break and hold about the 270 head count.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to be corrected on some details here and there, but we've been structurally, not occasionally, not on and off year, we've been structurally unable to break that number. I'm not at all wanting to give the police less money.
No.
I'm wanting the money, I'm fine with more. I want it to be employed productively. And funding 20 positions that are never there, I don't think is the most productive way. Now, that's an initial thought. We agree at
You
this
could buy a few
table.
more police
We
cars.
agree at this table, this is about putting stuff on the table
Yeah,
and coming out with better ideas. I don't wanna give them less.
no.
I'm fine with giving them more. I just wanna see bang for the buck.
Right.
And may I say this, you were at the pension board meeting the other day, and as a pensioner, I appreciate you being there, but the current retirees have not gotten a raise in years and years and years. Our current pension, while there's a bunch of money there, the people that make that decision don't feel like a raise can be given. And it hasn't been given in years. I've been retired 26 years, I don't remember, we may have gotten a raise right after I started, but basically I'm getting the same check that I've been getting for 26 years. And I'm fine with that, but some people put a whole lot more into the pension than I did. Guys retiring now put a lot more into it than I did, because that 13% and they were making more money, and I'm just y'all need to know that.
Well, I wanna make my point clear. I think everything has to be on the table when we look at this stuff, but I think all of us would agree, we need more police, not less. And the more we can do to incentivize to full staff, we gotta do that.
Well,
I think that's another cost though, Walt, we're not even talking about in recruiting.
Yeah.
I think that whole model is going to have to change in how we are recruiting, because if we do a good job recruiting in different ways, we're gonna have a full staff.
Well, I heard
Carly, getting back to what we were talking about,
Absolutely.
I think you can't depend on that pot of money. I think the question is, it's hard to make decisions, so y'all, do we know what the number is on the table?
I mentioned the interviews, the guys that had left New York City and went down to Florida, they loved being in the South so much. They loved being able to do their job so much. And while they weren't making as much money as New York City, some of them probably were invested in the pension a little bit already up there. But I just think there's people around the country, if they know what a good place this is, they would be, and the chief mentioned that. And I know he didn't mention those from Missouri that have come here. But this is a better place to work at the police department than Minneapolis or New York City or Chicago or Los Angeles, and just keep saying.
Yes, sir.
Yep, and I can agree. I feel the same way. We've all visited those places, so we know what the crime rates are like.
Oh, we pay more than Philadelphia PD does.
Wow. But I want to say this, Norman mentioned having all of our options on the table, and you even mentioned Elevate. So are we gonna really dive into, like, if Elevate was an option, what does that option look like? From where, from how
Right
did that
now,
come?
there's already-
20% of Elevate funds go directly into the public safety fund.
Okay.
So, 1 out of 5, is going in there, so it's a heavy investment. Certainly, I mean, the council can, again, I'm not advocating for it, idea on the table, telling how it will be transmitted. But, I mean,
Because I'm against police, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of what I said, and that is not.
I may be too, by the
I
time.
mean,
Yeah, exactly.
That's ultimately a policy
Do
decision.
we want to take all the Elevate
I
funds?
mean, but I mean, again, that's another place that you write it up on the whiteboard and you say, okay, here it is, and like everything else, if you do this, it probably means you can't do that. And then you just have to insert what this is and what that is and figure it out.
But the only way you're gonna come to a good answer on all of this is collaboration, conversation, hashing it out, and getting buy-in from everybody, because this is critical.
Yeah.
This is critical. This is a big decision a long time after I'm gone,
Well,
sitting up here.
I-
And
sure.
to Walt's point, I mean, we're all not gonna be here hopefully on this earth, to back up what he said.
I
But
don't know
mean,
about
Why
y'all.
do y'all look at me when you say that?
They're gonna roll me in a wheelchair. I'll be here. I don't know what y'all talking about.
You got 9 lives on your
You will
head.
be here.
I'm gonna be 100-year-old
You will
councilman.
be. I agree with that. If you're alive, you'll be up here.
Let me, I
Well,
will.
you gotta-
We'll
You
be
gotta
here.
have more of a life.
Yeah, they're gonna whisk me in here and order.
I hope I'm able to push you. I don't wanna be in the council then, but I'll push you.
I hope I'm still alive too.
But I will say this, probably the most important thing to the police officers, even the guy, like I said, I go in and pay my power bill every month. There's usually a different police officer working there. You know, all the high school games we go to, every officer, they just say, we love that pay plan, you know, the pay increase, thank you, but.
Yeah,
And it's the RSA. And I think that's, and you got so many of them that are, even after the big pay increase, or we're looking to move on because of the.
well, I understand we've lost one or two in
RSA.
Northport,
And
which
so
we've
I
never
think
had.
that's something that I think if the men were in here, all 200 plus of them, I believe 90% would say that's the most important thing.
I would ask that we not become exclusively target fixated on RSA.
Yeah,
That may be the answer, may be the best answer.
well,
And I don't know yet,
It's
but
part
let's
of,
please not put the blinders on
I
to
don't-
whether there's any other creative, out-of-the-box ways to help our people more,
Yeah.
not less, more, without hitching our wagon to RSA.
Well, and I understand where you come from, but I'm talking about my conversation.
Sure.
Strictly with the men.
you'd have to convince
and-
them
and
that
it's
something
not-
else was as
and,
good.
and one other thing I think is important, the future, I said this to, sorry, my caffeine, I think that's finally kicking in. I think it's the wind went through my ears, Carl.
Close the windows, Big E's.
Exactly. It is,
Put the drugs up.
The future of our city is also the people that we hire in all these other departments. And we've got to continue to be competitive, Walt, everywhere, because the job market, it's difficult to recruit, it's difficult to retain. And I think that we've lost a lot of good people in the city of
If
Tuscaloosa.
we don't have good people cutting
It-
grass on the
it's-
right of ways, we're in
it's-
trouble.
I mean, it's a bigger issue. I mean, public safety is huge, but I also think what we're trying to do for our employees is huge.
Well,
Because it's hard to find good people and keep them.
on the police side, every big city in Alabama, the Big Ten mayors, which I'm a part of, is dealing with this. If you're, first of all, keeping people in law enforcement, you begin to see a decline post-Ferguson in 2013. And then certainly Baltimore in 14 or 15, and then, Minneapolis in 2020. And the job market improved, and you look at being an officer and you can understand the difficulties of it. Then within law enforcement, being in an urban environment is much more difficult. And if you can have equal to, or in some cases even greater, to Northport's credit, they've matched our pay and their insurance costs are lower than ours. Or if you go work in another more rural setting, you can make equal to pay with less issues that find you in harm's way, or can find you on the front page of every national media outlet that's out there. Those are real constraints that we face within TPD and in every major city in Alabama. So that's what really concerns me from a hiring standpoint. I will say that we have recently we've actually done a really good job on the non-PD of hiring. We've picked up a lot of employees from a large institution here. And so I think the job market, for whatever reason, we're starting to see people apply again. And it's really good to see. I don't know what's happened out there in the economy, but we're getting more applications as of right now, and from other places. So I feel a lot better about that than I did 4 to 6 weeks ago. And LaShonda certainly could go in more details, but the recruitment challenge we have, fire and rescue is really, it's humming. As you heard, four vacancies out of 200 plus is extraordinary. PD is just a hard profession right now to recruit to, especially within the urban environment. But we can't quit on it. We have to accept that challenge and figure out how to make it work.
By the way, in comparison to other comparable southern cities, as much as I harp about that structural inability to get over about 90%, that's actually pretty good across the board. Look at what happened in Memphis. I mean, they have one spectacular murder, and it uncovers an entire force of decay over years that they're just helpless over. Chattanooga's having the same problem. You know, we go to Chattanooga to do baselining. I mean, I harp on that inability to break that barrier, but that's actually not bad in the place and the
Yeah.
time we're living in right now.
Well, I think our administrative folks at both those departments are doing really a great job with what they've got to do with.
Well, and I want to thank you for supporting the legislation that will allow our officers to move to 10-hour days or patrol division. What they're seeing out there, in fire and rescue too, I mean, and Colonel, you would understand this better than most, what they're seeing out there is traumatic every single day. I can't imagine. And I think having as much downtime as we can provide them is a very good thing for them and their families.
I agree.
That's huge for retention.
Oh, yeah.
They're gonna stay.
Do we have designated recruiting funds in TPD?
We,
I know we
There's an
paid
officer.
Rich's department
we have designated
a couple of
recruiting.
$100,000 to boost this and advertising and boost that, but as we, and this is it, and I'm gonna shut up about it after this, but as we wrestle with, do we continue funding or not continue funding positions that cannot structurally be filled? I think Chief Rice is right about the optics. I think it's a terrible, horrible time to ever hear the word defund the police in connection with Tuscaloosa.
Agreed.
And there are people who will spin it that way,
Oh, yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And it's not what it is, but it will be spun that way. If we could somehow route, rather than unfunding it or not, automatically route anything that results from unfilled positions into recruiting or at least a portion of it.
So,
Something that would help them.
so currently the recruiting campaign funding is within communications budget, strategic communications budget. And so they're the ones that take on the majority of that. The idea of recruitment for staff in general sits within HR, and there's nothing specifically designated within HR that is for public safety alone. So there's nothing within TPD
Okay,
or
so
within
it's
fire for
outside of
recruiting.
TPD. I don't know that is, as Norman talks about re-examining how we fund public safety, if I were commanding a force of 290 armed men and women, I would want to control my destiny over recruiting. I mean, I appreciate communications people and I appreciate HR people, but it's me and my 290 officers who understand what makes officers tick. And I would want to own.
They do have an officer
Anthony
assigned to
Smith,
that, though.
Anthony
They do.
Smith used to be
It's
like
not
a
him.
full-time recruiter
It's
at one
not
time,
him.
didn't he?
When Chief Blakely's, and he would need, or Chief Rice would need to brief you on it, but if my memory serves me correct, when he became chief, he assigned someone full-time
Yeah.
to recruiting, whereas in the past, they didn't have that.
Yeah.
So that's my understanding, but, you know, certainly, we're,
That's correct. I've been able to talk to him.
Do we, so, we've kind of beat this up pretty good. Do we have any agency discussion we need to get in this morning? There's no scheduled presentations. I'd like to move out of here around 11:30 if we
Yeah, I need
can
to.
deal with anything we need to deal with.
Okay, no, I digress. Will we have a chance during finance, if we want to talk about anything?
About what? It's
About
a-
agencies? Did you just say agencies?
If there's something specific you want to bring up, we can vote to hear it.
Yeah, I've got, I don't know if the place, Tom, I was really
Yeah.
gonna put together something more exact, but it's basically roughly 50,000 increase to tourism, and it's all dealing with software.
Oh.
And that, I know that the mayor has recommended 200,000, I think, to plant the seed toward the Saban Center and Event Center. And I was talking to Kelsey a couple of times, and they got there are three things that they could fund for about $55,000. And it'd be best for me to kind of send each of you the exact, what I have. One is visitor intel data, and it's about $25,000. Also, there's a software that might be used for Jasmine and Stan, dealing strictly with customer relationships and follow-ups. They're really behind on their software, and their website is very outdated. So those three things they could get for about $55,000 additional dollars. And one deals with strategic planning. It's kind of an interesting thing that would affect everybody. They've got one, for example, could set up, if somebody comes to Tuscaloosa, they could get what's called three tickets. They go Civil Rights Trail, Barbecue Trail, Soul Food Restaurants, for example. And it's those types of things that, it's really good, it's good stuff, and it's all their stuff is dealing with software.
I was impressed. I was at the airport meeting recently, and she was able to tell that group just some amazing numbers about people coming from other places here and this, that, and the other, and going. What they can do now is wonderful. If they can do more, that'd even be better.
Let me talk process here.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think this is,
That's all I had.
What is the 25,000? Is that, am I reading that right, TTSC? What is the 25,000 for tourism?
Last year, we did
already?
a special appropriation for software.
Oh, well, okay, so it's not in this year, that's right, it's just 25.
let's talk process, because we're coming into what should be the end of the shoot. People have some changes they want here, some there, and it's, a little bit like keeping 7 kittens in the box.
It's not easy.
Here's what I plan to do in terms of process. If you've got structural proposed changes to the submitted budget, get it to me in writing by, let's say, Wednesday afternoon. That'll give us, we'll finish up today. But if you've got a proposed change to the submitted budget, get it to me, and I will consolidate those and give them for publishing on Thursday midday for next week's agenda.
Got it.
Next week's finance agenda is gonna be this simple, okay? There's 3 members of this finance committee. If you've got a change on there, it'll be introduced, an opportunity for a motion, an opportunity for a second, a vote. Boom. We're gonna move through them like that, all right? So that's how, and it will be doubled up that night
Yeah.
for full council, so that it's not a one person deal killer. And then if it gets through that night, fine. If not, then the following Tuesday is the last one in September, and it'll be put for a vote.
And,
Okay.
but
Are
also,
there any comments or
yeah,
suggestions?
but remind you too,
I
though,
appreciate that.
if the,
Thank you, Mr. Busby.
if the finance committee doesn't pass something, but you have 4 votes for the full council,
Still bring it.
that person can bring it.
Right.
That's right.
Okay, here's
Still
my
bring it.
Yeah.
question, and maybe it's
Does it only
ignorance on
take
my
4?
part.
Just,
If
I
it,
thought it
how's
took
it been
5.
presented at council?
Any
You can bring it to
councilman
the
can
floor.
bring it to the floor.
I know, but doesn't it
It's a 5.
require a unanimous consent?
you can be voted
No,
on
if
again.
it's not advertised or shown? Okay, all right.
Certain ordinances do require the unanimous consent,
that-
that requires
this-
the 5 votes, but some are just resolutions.
All right, I'm not
A mix.
interested in abrogating or changing any of those procedures, but in terms of finance committee, it's coming up. Is there a motion? Is there a second? All in favor, all opposed, boom, and we're moving on.
I understand.
May I ask a question? All right, I'm good with what you just said, and I'm good with this $60,000, but who's gonna decide where it comes from?
Exactly.
Well, I would, in order for the finance committee to vote on it, it certainly would stand a better chance of passing if whoever's proposing it has a proposal for where it's coming
And they should.
from. And enjoy it.
Well, that was,
So we send our emails to everybody or just to you?
Now, you send it to everybody as long as I get
Hey,
a
it's
copy.
politic time, honey.
It's politics. So we're gonna take some money from.
It's politicking time. There's
Let me
seven
go ahead and
people-
send my email. Let me go ahead and get my decision on the table.
But I was gonna send that, that's why I didn't have it sent to you already, because I've got it pretty much in 2 paragraphs.
Okay.
Okay. That's the fun part.
You better do your politicking, cause next Tuesday is
That's it.
is gavel banging.
This is the most fun part of the
Make sure
year.
that gavel gets lost between now and Tuesday.
I'm gonna steal that gavel.
I got you, Kip.
Well, is there anything else,
I've got one at
to
home.
cover today?
Don't help,
No,
don't
sir.
help God.
That's good, it's all good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's call it a morning.
All right.